Your name is Dirk Strider, and you're tired and hungry and exhausted. And, oh yeah, basically homeless. When Roxy tells you about Jane.
She's looking for a roomie.
Roxy grins, pushing her french fries your way.
Just need someone to sign the lease with her and help her pay the rent.
That's a problem, Rox.
You remind her, inhaling the fries without looking.
I don't have a job, remember?
You'll get one, though.
Roxy waves her hand.
Trust me, it's no biggie to Janie. Not for a few months at least.
You slurp your Coke and eye her from behind your shades. She's the picture of innocence, chomping on a wad of gum the size of her fist, her new addiction now that she's finally kicked the alcoholism. And winking, wonking, at you every few minutes.
It's a really good deal, D-Stry,
she says sing-song. Well, it's certainly better than nothing.
Set it up and make it so, Rolal.
You shrug, leaning back in your seat and enjoying the feeling of food in your belly again.
It's been far too long.
You murmur silently to your food baby, caressing it like an expecting mother. You haven't actually seen Jane since high school, 6 years ago. Man, are you that old already? She's still short and curvy, but there's a leanness to her you can't explain, and a turn to her smile that you can't figure out. She doesn't mind at all that you don't have a job. In her own words, she's still got more than enough funds in her account left over from the share of the infamous Crocker fortune she was able to get away with before being disinherited.
So I'm a trophy roommate.
You tease.
Only if you agree to be my date to family functions now and then.
She giggles back. The apartment she's looking at is so domestic it makes your skin crawl. Hardwood floors, wooden boxes, and French doors opening onto a tiny balcony patio. She falls in love with it. You're not entirely immune to the inside's melting power of her wide, bright grin. It's not so bad, even if it only has one bathroom. 15 minutes later, you're signing the lease alongside her. A feeling of trepidation in your gut that doesn't entirely overbalance the relief of having a roof over your head again. Moving in is an interesting experience. You find out her dad died a few summers after graduation, that her little brother John got shot and moved away with his troll girlfriend, that she's been hopping from friend to friend and living rough, like you, since the fallout with the Batter Witch. She learns that you and your own little bro aren't on speaking terms, that you gave up a lucrative desk job to try and open a robotics store that folded, that more often than not you've been sleeping in strange beds, and once you entered an interspecies fighting ring and came away with missing teeth and a broken nose and no jackpot. She's making cupcakes when you get out of the shower. The warm vanilla scent straightening out that knot in your back that's been there for a few years now. Just a little.
Jane,
you tell her as you reach for a cupcake.
I'm gonna try and find a job here soon, but
Her phone goes off, and the voice on the other end is incomprehensible and loud enough to shatter an eardrum at 50 paces. She asks a few questions, hangs up, and looks at you with a very wide, very unstable smile.
Mr. Strider,
she says,
how would you like to help me solve a murder?
Well, sure.
What do you mean, solve a murder?
You ask in the cab.
I mean, the police call me when there are murders I can't figure out, and I solve them.
Jane replies, fitting a filthy fedora over her short curly hair.
John and I did it together before,
She goes quiet, coughs, and fixes the deranged smile on again.
I thought it might be a fun distraction.
Fun is a relative term. The detective in charge of the case is a short, nubby-horned troll bag of thinly veiled rage and disappointment, with a profanity-printed wrapper. Though the presence of a weeping human child seems to be keeping the cap on the troll's language. You can still hear it, in the echoes of his pauses and hems and haws.
Who's this?
The troll grinds out, glancing at the kid and back at Jane.
Detective Mantis, this is my assistant for the day, Dirk Strider.
Jane says cheerfully.
What happened to John?
Detective Vantis grunts, glaring you down in a way that makes you wonder if he looks at everyone like that, or if he's hate flirting with you.
John went with Vrista.
Jane says shortly. Detective Vantis bites off another curse, and instead spits it on the ground.
If he's anything like Dave Strider, I'm kicking you both off this case so fast, your heads won't have time to stop spinning before I get a restraining order on both of you.
Detective Vantis hisses. Well, that explains the glaring.
I mean it, Crocker. What Strider douche peep out of him, and your sorry glutes have a one-way ticket back to the Carcat Vantis' list of people who are not allowed within 200-yard radius of me or my precinct. Is that clear?
You're being overdramatic.
Jane sighs.
I'm being considerate of my blood pressure.
Detective Vantis grunts.
Come on, then.
The crime scene is a bloody mess. If you weren't a Strider, and therefore a master of the poker face, you'd probably be out there with the kid, wheezing into a shock blanket. There are pieces of what you presume was the kid's mother strewn from one end of the room to the other, and unsettling clown-themed pictures painted all over the walls. Jane goes stiff.
Vantis,
She says softly.
what am I doing here?
The troll pretends he hasn't heard her, and starts naming off details.
Jessica Bennett, 32, human. Single mom living with her son. The kid found her coming home from school. We can't get any information from the son.
Vantis.
Jane says again, more urgently.
The kid doesn't know anything.
Detective Vantis continues, voice louder.
But from what we can tell, she was working with a PI agency.
Carcat.
Jane barks. The troll goes quiet.
What
She says evenly.
am I doing here?
Detective Vantis looks at her, and it's like a little kid looking back through the baggy eyes and overcrowded fangs.
You can't honestly tell me you didn't know who the culprit was the second you stepped inside.
Jane says.
I told you, I don't want anything to do with him or who he works for. Why am I here?
You're lost, thoroughly lost, and the smell of the blood is starting to make you feel woozy. You think you're probably entitled to a bit of queasiness, since you can't stop looking at a dismembered arm in the corner.
Because
Detective Vantis says, voice more calm than it's been in the few minutes you've known him.
I need your help finding him.
We did find him, remember?
Jane says bitterly.
Him and his stupid bosses. Or was it some other woman you know who was keeping John's heart pumping while you took your sweet time letting the stupid clown get away?
Detective Vantis's snarl is back, the fiery red of his pupils looking, if possible, even brighter.
You are the complete idiots
He hisses.
who went in with no backup.
They glare at each other. You cough.
Not to break up the pity party, but a kid just lost his mom. Can we focus here?
You say. Bright blue and red eyes snap towards you, then look away. Detective Vantis continues his briefing while Jane treads carefully across the room.
Any footprints?
She asks, voice brittle.
No prints of any kind that we've been able to find. Not even in the finger paint on the walls.
Detective Vantis replies.
The method is all ahem, but the cleanup is too precise. Hence why I'm forced on bended knee to humbly beseech your assistance, Crocker. Please note the godlike levels of humility I'm stooping to here.
You just watched Jane work. You're not all entirely sure why she thought you would be useful here. You're not a gumshoe or a detective. You're not a genius or a Sherlock of any kind. You're a 24-year-old loser, with a collection of cheap swords and inappropriate handicrafts. And you're definitely about to hurl.
I'm gonna step out.
You say, though it doesn't appear Jane or Detective Vantis heard you. You shrug and go find the bathroom. Once your cupcake breakfast of champions is swirling down the toilet, and you can't taste the bile anymore, you nose around to check for clues or something. Man, you're not good at this. The extent of your detective training is Scooby-Doo, and that one pony book you made Jane way back in middle school. It's rare for a Strider to be out of his element. You're a misplaced atom, swirling around in the vacuum of space. You walk into what appears to be an office. There are crayon drawings on the walls and a flurry of papers everywhere. Pictures and case files, looks like. She did work for a PI agency, after all. Jane and Detective Vantis are apparently arguing about something back at the crime scene, but you ignore them. You're snooping. There's a single bookshelf, mostly packed in with children's books, and a filing cabinet overflowing with files. Did she work for herself, you wonder? Or was she just the work-from-home type of lady? She had a son, after all. Her laptop is still on her desk, and nothing looks like it's been disturbed, which strikes you as odd. Her attack likely didn't have anything to do with her work if nothing's missing, but to know if anything's missing, you'd need an expert. You walk outside and make a beeline for the kid in the back of the ambulance. He's not crying anymore, but he has a sort of a shell-shocked look in his eyes, which you can relate to. Every cop on the scene saw who you came in with. They leave you alone.
Hey, bud.
You say quietly, squatting a good distance from the kid, but on his level.
I'm with the police.
By proxy. Not necessarily a lie.
Are you up to answering a few questions?
He stares at you.
You don't look like a policeman.
I'm a special kind of policeman.
You reply.
If something was taken from your mom's office, would you be able to know what it was?
He hesitates, but nods. You pull out your phone. You aren't stupid enough to let the kid back into the house. Not with his mom in pieces. But you are just smart enough to take some pictures of the office to show to the kid. He takes your phone and looks at the pictures, brow furrowing, and a little nub of something you thought you'd gotten over once Dave said he didn't need you anymore nudges you in the chest.
Her binder's missing,
The kid says.
What was in it?
You ask.
I don't know.
He shrugs.
I think it was a really big case.
His eyes fill with tears.
Is that why?
He starts shaking and hyperventilating as he gives you your phone back, and you're chased away by a mama bear paramedic who puts her arms around the kid and glares at you like you're the one who killed his mother. You step off and go to find Jane. Her and Detective Vantis are still arguing about something or other when you clear your throat.
Yes, Dirk?
Jane asks, interrupting Vantis mid-rant.
I just talked to the kid.
You say, and before Vantis can puff up and explode, you hurry on.
I showed him some of the pictures of the mom's office. He says she has a big binder that's missing from there.
What sort of binder?
Jane frowns.
He thinks it was for a case she was working.
You say.
Dunno. Maybe it's in another part of the house, but I thought it might be worth looking into.
Jane beams. All right. Maybe you're not totally useless.
Detective Vantis, what agency was she working for?
She was mostly self-employed.
Vantis shrugs.
But from what we've been able to uproot, she was an outpost of a private investigator/bounty hunter company downtown.
Text me the address.
Jane says, and she's making for the door.
You guys will have your hands full with the cleanup, I imagine.
Sure, whatever.
Detective Vantis sighs, scratching his hand through his hair.
Keep me updated this time, would you?
As if I would do otherwise.
Jane winks.
Thank you, Detective. You made the right decision bringing me on.
Don't make me regret it more than you already have, Crocker!
He yells, but the two of you are already out the door and striding down the street.
Hungry?
She asks briskly.
I know a good place for lunch.